everybody, this is Jonathan Miller. I'm here along Route 22 here in Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania. This is the birthplace of James Lick. We're at the Pennsylvania Historic Monument for James Lick. The Lickdale is actually named after him. The California financier and philanthropist donor of the Lick Observatory was born in Fredericksburg, August 21st, 1796. The Lick family monuments may be seen in a local cemetery. That's Cedar Hill Cemetery, that's where we're going to go next. So we're going to show the really cool monument there that James Lick paid for, and then at some point we'll go back to check out. We had done those monuments in an earlier video just because of how impressive they are, but we're going to do this for this video, and then we're going to talk about James Lick's life a little bit, but we're not going to go deep into him because that's going to wind up being another like documentary series on him, just because him and his son were just such phenomenal guys. Well, we're going to see you over there at the Cedar Hill Cemetery. Hey, so over my right shoulder back there, that's the Lick Mausoleum, and that is the burial place of John Lick, who is James Lick's son. And so I'm going to give you a little bit on. I'm going to talk about James Lick's life here while we look at the monument, talk about the monument a little bit as well. But James Lick is one of those figures in history that just is not that well known, and unfortunately should be well known. He actually, by the time he got out to California, to the San Francisco region, he was actually, I think, like the 1880s region period of time, he was probably the richest person in California. He's actually the one responsible, if you've ever heard of the Lick Observatory, he's the one that paid for that completely. He also paid for this monument, which we're going to show you here in a second. Really extraordinary guy, a little weird, but very philanthropic with the way he handled. His son was very much the same way. They gave and gave and gave. And you actually see in the distance back there, that would be the monument that John Lick paid for Civil War veterans. So we're going to flip this around just quick. All right, so here we are. This is the Lick family monument. This was done, put up as a monument to his father and grandfather for their service during the French and Indian War and Revolution. It's really just, this is one of those monuments we talked about before when we were here. You would see this on like a Civil War battlefield, or like Gettysburg or something. It's commemorative of the service rendered by William Lick, grandfather of James Lick, at Valley Forge and other struggles of the Revolutionary War for American independence, who died in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, at the age of 104 years old. I always thought that was such a cool monument there, the Revolutionary War soldier, and then that would be Lady Liberty up there. A lot of cool sayings, but the story goes with James Lick. He was born in this area. His father, I believe, was a cabinet maker, so that was the trade he learned, and he fell in love with a young woman who was the daughter of a rather well-off miller. He was a ground flour and that type of stuff. He had a mill, and he fell in love with her. He wound out basically, he got her pregnant, and he went to go ask for the permission the blessing of her father to marry his daughter, and he basically told him he wasn't good enough. He was garbage and all this other stuff, and he said, once you go and you get yourself a mill and you do that, then here's the gravestones of, I believe it's his father and his mother. Memory of John Lick, father of James Lick. But he really adored his father and his mother, so he put up this monument. Like I said, over there is the Civil War monument that John Lick, his son, wound up paying for. But he left a bunch of money in his will for this specifically to be built after his death, which is what happened, along with many other gifts to different organizations and to people that needed help in the general region. But we're going to go back to my van, and then we'll talk a little bit more about his life and how he wound out in California. And it's a really impressive guy. All right, so he got jilted with this by this miller, who basically told him, bugger off, I don't want you around, you're not good enough for my daughter and all that. So he had learned the cabinet making profession. He eventually went down to Virginia and learned piano making business. Did quite well, found out that his pianos were especially being bought down in South America, so he decided, hey, I'm going to go down there. So he went down to South America, I believe it was Brazil first, and did phenomenally well. And he decided he was going to go on a European tour. And so he went on that, and by the time he came back, there was a struggle and a civil war. He wound up getting captured, was put in prison, wound out escaping, went back to his business, wound out selling it. Then I guess he went over to, I believe it was Peru, started another piano making business. Did really, really well with that. Then the gold rush started to happen in California. He decided, I'm going to sell everything I have a bunch of gold, I'm going to go and buy property. He was a guy that was really good businessman, and he would see the guys and the women that can see ahead and sort of see where a market's going to be or where there's going to be a potential good business venture. They do really, really well, and that's what he did. He invested in property. He wound up making his own mill, which far outreached the mill of this guy here in Fredericksburg. It was said it was one of the most impressive, technologically advanced mills anywhere. He made huge strides in horticulture, and then, you know, he did all kinds of great stuff. He invested in his hotel, which he said was really, really impressive. I think that got destroyed in the San Francisco earthquake and the fire that came after that. But anyways, he went back once because he heard he had a son. And he went back, he wasn't able to find anybody, and he went back to California again. But he wrote letters, and eventually he got a hold of his son, and he said, I have more than enough for you and I. He said, come out here. And eventually John did, and he wound up getting involved with, after his father died, with making sure everything was dispersed properly and all that. But it had sort of a weird relationship, like, you know, it had to be odd. But you know, I think he made his peace, and it's like that was dad, but he ultimately came back here and made a huge impact. And Lickdale as well was sort of, in a way, named after John as well, because he's the one that came back in there and basically eventually bought Union Forge and then revitalized that area, brought business back in. You know, eventually Union Forge was going to go out anyways, just because technologies had changed and all that, and it was the rolling mills were taking over and that type of stuff. But he brought brick manufacturing in, and a number of other things as well, and really was beloved in the community. Like, he wound up building that town, and it was a lot bigger then than it is now, but pretty cool guys. But James Lick, unfortunately, he's a guy that is really forgotten in history. So many of the things that he did, making, you know, San Francisco is what it became because of him. And I think they said there's only one, like, alleyway or something, like, small back road that is named after him. And then, of course, the Lick Observatory is, but a lot of people don't know who that is. And it's a shame, because he had led an extraordinary life. Very odd life, very much a loner. You think, in a way, a little bit of another figure from history like Howard Hughes was very, very brilliant, but very odd. Now, this guy wasn't storing his pee or anything like that, but he really, like, he loved people, but he didn't really want to be around them, which I can understand that, you know, to a degree. But he really made huge impacts, and James Lick is a guy well worth remembering, and that monument is just so impressive. It really is. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's just weird because it's on the, you know, in this cemetery here. It's called Cedar Hill Cemetery. It's behind Sherwin-Williams. It's a big paint manufacturing plant and stuff like that. And it's just sitting up here on a hill, and there's these the Mausoleum, and then these two impressive monuments. And they're just, this is something you would see on like a national battlefield type thing. But spent a lot of money to get this done, but he really loved his father, his mother. He really loved his grandfather, was very proud. I forget what the spelling of it was, because it wasn't Lick, it was something else, and then they sort of Englishized. You know, you'd sort of, as you came over here, you made it Englishy or whatever. And like we've talked about the Light family in Lebanon with Light Sports, it was Leicht, and then it turned to Light, Light. This was somewhat similar. It was a different spelling of Lick, and it eventually evolved into L-I-C-K. But funny note, before I knew any of this, we had my one teacher, Mr. Swisher. He was talking to us about the history of the local area. He was a science teacher, but he had this, he abbreviated, everything. And, Lickdale was Lick, and then you had Fredericksburg was Fred, and Jonestown was Jones. And it was just sort of, everybody was just secretly giggling, hee, Lick Fred. So it was just one of those things. It's like stupid little minds of teenagers, but I always remember that. It was just funny because everybody started giggling, and like Mr. Swisher was like, "What's everybody laughing about? Like Lick Fred, hee." But anyways, it was just sort of comical. But in all seriousness, James Lick is somebody that's definitely worth remembering. He made huge impacts on society. Great legacy. His life didn't go necessarily the way he had wanted it to, but he did very, very well for himself, and then he passed that on to the people that were less fortunate. Did a lot for widows, for kids trying to get, very big about education in the area, the homeless, that type of stuff. He gave a lot of money. Most of his money went to organizations like that. A lot went to the two big ones were this monument and then the Lick Observatory. He also left, I guess John, when he came out, said, listen, a little more needs to be left for the relatives that need help in, back home and that type of stuff. So John didn't want anything. He's like, I'm perfectly fine. Like, he had done really well as a businessman as well. Eventually, when we talk about Jacob Albright and John Walter, their first seminary for the Evangelical Association was a Schuylkill Seminary right here in Fredericksburg, on the other side of Fredericksburg, be the west side, I believe. Yeah, be the west side of Fredericksburg. They call the one chicken manufacturing plant College Hill. Well, the reason it's called College Hill is because that seminary was up on that hill above Bell Evans, where that is today. And he paid for that entirely. He was he was an Evangelical Association member, and some of his relatives are buried over at the one church here in Fredericksburg that we visited. But really cool guy. We're going to be doing another one when I do these different historical figures like Milton Hershey, H.B. Reese, Jacob Albright, John Walter, some of the other founders of the churches and denominations like John Casper Stover, the Muhlenberg dynasty. There's also a guy that was the father of the Reformed Church. We'd like to talk about him as well and do a documentary on him. Other really interesting individuals, and James Lick is one of those individuals. So we'll go probably a 2 or 3 part series and do that on James Lick. This is just purely for the historic marker. But anyways, thank you as always, coming along, learning a little more hometown history, and as always, we'll see you all about town.
So I wanted to add a couple pictures, and this is James Lick. This is what he would have looked like probably in his 40s or his 50s. The next picture here, this is, I'm not quite sure where this is. I would assume the Lick Observatory. They have this monument there to him, which it talks about him starting at 1888. This is James Lick High School, actually, which I thought that was pretty cool. This is actually, I believe, in San Jose, California. And there you have the James Lick comments, which is pretty neat that they actually have a high school that's named after him. So he is remembered. And also here next is the James Lick Memorial, which is actually in San Francisco. So there is more than just a road named after him. This is actually inside the Lick House, which is that hotel that I talked about that he built. There are no pictures of the mill or that I could find of this. And this is the Lick Observatory there. It's still considered one of the best observatories in the world. It was built, like I said, in 1888. There's the telescope inside the dome. And last but not least, I had said how they buried him underneath the observatory, and this is where he's buried, underneath the observatory. He was a well-appreciated man, an interesting and extraordinary man.